Once again, for this small, intimate gathering, I want to introduce Mr. Paul Toner. He's the third of 4 finalists for the superintendent position here in Everett. He has visited the district today. And I'm going to just give him the microphone, let him introduce himself, and carry it on from there.
Thank you. I know a few of you were here before, but please bear with me for going through my background a little bit again. As I told the earlier group, I'm somebody who grew up not too far away from here. I grew up in Somerville and Cambridge, North Cambridge to be exact. I grew up in a working class community that was all about giving back and supporting others in their community, and I'm very proud that many of my family have gone into public service either as teachers or firefighters, nurses, police officers, and that's the community I grew up in and the values I grew up with. And so going through school myself in Cambridge and Somerville, I had teachers who were role models to me, actually suggested and encouraged me to think about teaching as a career. I was also interested in law and politics, and I'll talk about that in a second. But as I went through elementary and middle school and then on to high school, I went off to BU for my undergrad. And even though I was interested in law school, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to just go straight off to law school. I was the oldest of 4 boys. My mom had been widowed when my dad died when I was 15, and couldn't afford to just go straight off to law school. So I took the advice that my teachers had given me, and I pursued the idea of teaching and giving back to my community, and put off the idea of law school for a while. I went to UMass Boston and got my master's degree in education. I substituted while I was working nights at W.R. Grace Chemicals in North Cambridge, working 2 jobs until I finally got a full-time teaching job as a middle school social studies teacher at the Harrington Elementary School in East Cambridge. It's now a beautiful, gorgeous, brand new building called the King Open on Cambridge Street in East Cambridge. After my first year of teaching, I kept my options open, decided to go to law school, and I went to law school nights at Suffolk. Again, that was actually a couple of teachers that gave me that idea, because when I was in high school, some of my teachers were going to law school nights, so I didn't know that was an avenue until I saw them do it, so I pursued a law degree. During the time that I was going to law school, I realized that I was having much more of a positive impact as a teacher on my community, so I stayed in education, but I had the opportunity to use my law degree later in life as I got more involved in the teachers union. After 10 years in the classroom teaching middle school social studies, I went on to become the president of the Cambridge Teachers Association. And just to explain, I actually got involved with the union because I thought the union could be a proactive force for improving outcomes for kids, and be solutions oriented and be leading the profession. So I ran and won and became the president of the Cambridge Teachers Association. And during my 5 years in that position, I worked very closely with administration and principals and my members to actually turn the tide in Cambridge. We had been going through a period of declining enrollment, and people were lacking faith, especially in our middle school and high school program. And by working together, we actually turned that around to the point that now Cambridge Regional Latin High School, much like Everett, is bursting at the seams, and people are leaving private elementary schools to come to Cambridge Regional Latin. And I take pride in the fact that I know that that was part of the work that I did as president of the Cambridge Teachers Association. I then went on to become the vice president and president of the Massachusetts Teachers Association. For those of you who don't know, the MTA is the largest professional union association in New England with 120,000 members. I represented teachers from pre-K through higher ed. I advocated for them at the state and national level. I worked on state and national policy and legislation regarding teacher evaluation, standards, curriculum, and a variety of other issues during my course there. In addition, I was also leading a very large organization with 200 employees and a $43 million budget. I was responsible for building that budget from scratch every year for 8 years. I then had to go forward and explain and justify that budget at multiple levels, from a small advisory board early in the fall all the way through the MTA Executive Committee, the MTA Board of Directors, and finally the MTA annual meeting, which traditionally had probably 1,500 members, where I would have to stand up and explain every penny and dime that was being spent of member dues and why we were spending it. I'm very proud of my record as a teacher leader, a union leader, but I also know that that's an issue that I should probably shed some light on. As I said, I became a teacher leader, union leader with the CTA and the MTA because I wanted to do what I thought was best for children and to actually support teachers in that work. So everything I did in those roles was very student-centered. How is this going to help teachers, and how is it fair? How is it going to help students, and is it fair to teachers? And that was how I led the organization. In 2014, I finished my term, my second term in office as president of the MTA. I began working as a consultant and working with different education organizations around the country, and I'm now the senior director of policy and partnerships for Teach Plus, which is a national organization working with teachers on on education policy and teacher-led professional development. So that's my career in a nutshell, and my background, and I'd love to just open it up to questions from the audience at this point.
I was just wondering if you could offer some more insights on proactive financial management that you've had to handle in the past, considering we have, I think, another 13 million allocated annually with the new formula.
Sure. Yeah. So in my role at the MTA, as I said, 8 years of building and developing the budget. We had to, there were, as you know, the Great Recession came along. We had to budget in case we were going to lose members. We had to make sure that we were covering our pension costs, our health care costs for our employees, all of our program costs. Had to be able to go out and justify to the membership why we were either increasing, or in many cases we kept dues at zero and didn't increase for several years because we knew that our members were hurting during the first few years of the Great Recession, not having gotten raises or increases themselves. Look strategically at some of our assets. So for instance, the MTA used to own its own insurance company, and we said, are we really in the business of running an insurance company? That's not really our core mission. So thinking ahead, we divested ourselves of the insurance company, put those dollars into reserve for a rainy day. And another big decision that we made is we also used to own a very nice piece of property at the top of Beacon Hill, right next to the State House, 20 Ashburton Place. And after 50, 60 years of being there and knowing that it was going to cost $13 million to fix the building up, we had to have a long strategic conversation about, do we really need to be here, the entire staff of the MTA? And we decided really just the government relations people and maybe some of our lawyers need to be there, but we moved the rest of the folks off Beacon Hill down to Quincy and managed to put $16 million in reserves, which the MTA has now used in different ways since I've left. But we were always, looking ahead to the challenges we were going to face. So that's how I handled some of the issues at the MTA. We built a strategic action plan and we budgeted to the plan. Not knowing exactly the strategic plans that may be in place here in Everett at this particular time, if there isn't one already, then building that together with the community and then budgeting against that plan. Sure. And I know that there's money coming, hopefully year one, but we also know that the legislature hasn't exactly identified how they're going to raise that money. So it's a promise for now, and hopefully they'll be able to make good on it. Well, I'm hoping the video from before gets shown at the same time as this video in case there were questions earlier. So. Oh.
Start us off.
Sure.
Hi. How's it
Hi.
going? My mind just went completely blank. It's
Uh-oh.
been a long day. I was just going to ask why you chose Everett as a place you wanted to apply, and what your experience is with working in an urban district with a high level of English language learners.
Sure. So the reason that I would truly enjoy being the superintendent at Everett is, in my opinion, Everett is very similar to the communities that I grew up in and worked in, both Somerville and Cambridge, long before they became the real estate, boons that they are now. And the Harrington School, where I worked, its motto was actually "A World in a Schoolhouse." We had 50 to 55% of our students were all English second language learners, new arrivals. 75% of our students were free and reduced lunch, and I think about 20% of our students were on IEPs. And it was a lovely, lovely place and community, and I truly enjoyed working with those parents and students. I see in Everett, number one, I mentioned earlier, and it's going to get confusing from the earlier questions, but I think there's a lot of strong foundations here in my visit here today, seeing the administrators and teachers in action. You have, quality people in place. I know that we can go even further and farther with the work that you've done. I think there's been, to some degree, some pent-up desire to have more opportunities to express ideas here in Everett, and I'd really want to capitalize on all that energy. My experience has always been in Cambridge, which I know most people don't, when they think of Cambridge, they think of Harvard, MIT, and now Kendall Square. But the Cambridge I know is East Cambridge, Central Square, Area 4, North Cambridge, where we have the kids I saw in classrooms today were the same kids that were sitting in my classroom in Cambridge. And while I was at the MTA, I was a fervent advocate for the gateway cities. In fact, if I had my way, pretty much all and any new funding would be going to the 30 or so gateway cities, because when we talk about achievement and opportunity gaps, that's where they mostly are, and we could do an awful lot to close those gaps if we invested heavily in the gateway cities and supports for those kids and communities. You started to have a question.
Well, she kind of took it.
Oh, okay.
What is your classroom experience? What was your classroom experience? What were you teaching, and how did you interact with central office?
Sure. So my classroom experiences was 9-10 years of middle school social studies teaching at, as I said, the Charles G. Harrington School. I taught Western civilization, world civilization, and American history civics in 7th and 8th grade. I loved teaching history. I still love history, the subject. I think it's very much a hands-on topic. We were talking a little bit earlier about how the things that I did every year that bring the most joy to me was introducing young people to law and politics and civics, bringing them to the State House to meet their state representatives and senators and see the history of the State House. And we were fortunate enough, although I had to sell an awful lot of candy, and the kids sold a lot of candy. I know we're not allowed to do that anymore in most places, but did a lot of fundraising and brought for 8 years in a row, and they still continue this tradition in Cambridge of bringing the kids to Washington, D.C. for the week and visiting the Capitol, visiting their Congress representatives, and visiting all the important historical sites. So civics for me is just as essential as mathematics and STEM and ELA and other subjects. Especially in the times we live in, we really have to engage our kids and our community in the importance of civics. So that's my background in the classroom. My engagement with central administration begins really with I was the student support teacher for the school, so I dealt with a lot of working with the adjustment counselors and other support services for kids in need, managed sort of the files on that and guided things at the Harrington School. Then I got more involved with the teachers union, and once I became president of the teachers union, having already done grievances and collective bargaining as vice president, one of the first things I did after getting elected is I went around and met with every single principal in the school system. And at the time, that was 16 principals. And I sat down with them and explained who I was, that I wanted to build strong, respectful, trusting relationships and develop strong labor management relationships. And as a result, for 5 years in Cambridge, out was the bad old days of everything had to be a fight, and it was much more about how do we work together to solve the problems that we're trying to solve for our kids and our teachers. And I was very involved with central administration on all things human resources. I was there for all the budget meetings. I was there for many of the facilities planning meetings. You know, I pretty much, I feel like being local union president is basically the flip side of the coin for superintendent. I might not have been in the position to make the decision the way the superintendent or assistant superintendent did, but I was very much involved in the decisions in the process. Don't fight now.
I'm such a microphone hog. I like to try and give everyone else a chance before I take over. So, in the face of ongoing predatory nature of the higher education lending system, you know, there's a need to reconsider the conversation we're having with young people in the about their future in the industrial world. Maybe you could speak a little bit about how you would lead our community to reevaluate that conversation.
Sure. So I've been very excited to, one, read about and now visit some of your programs here at the high school, the CT and the Pathways program. Look, any young person who wants to go to four-year college and get their bachelor's degree and beyond, we need to provide them with the education and the supports and the opportunity for them to be able to do it. I don't want anybody to leave this community not feeling like they could be successful pursuing a four-year degree. At the same time, I also know, looking at what's going on in our economy and in higher ed, I'm also a member of the State Board of Higher Education. You know, we need to be providing more opportunities to defray the costs. So for instance, one program that's out there is early college high school, so kids can actually be taking early college dual enrollment courses and earning credits in college so that while they're still in high school and save that money when they go on. But I also want any young person to actually go on to higher education or to certification programs with an understanding of who they are and what they want to be when they grow up. So that they know what they're investing in. I think it's a tragedy when young people spend $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year to go off to college, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what their career plans may be, because they didn't have a career plan to begin with. Look, I know plenty of people who've had different careers all through their life, and lots of people have explored different opportunities, and all of us, I think, look at different. I think this generation, I think something like the average is they'll have like 8, 9, 10 jobs before they retire and finish their career. We need to provide young people with the knowledge and skills to be adaptable and be constant lifelong learners. And I personally, one of my jobs in high school and college was working for a company called W.R. Grace. If I wanted to get a chemistry job or a sales job or an accountant job, they would have paid for me to go to college. I think we need to be looking for opportunities to get our kids hooked up with companies that are willing to support and pay for their education. And also the trades. I'm very proud of my relationship with all the folks in the trade unions and my friends and relatives. There's good money to be made in the trades, and if young people then want to continue to go on to higher education, they can do that while they're already earning a degree. Nobody, we call it a four-year degree. It doesn't have to be earned in 4 years. There's other ways to get that bachelor's degree if you want to. Did I answer your question? Okay.
We have had the same leader for 30 years, until about a year ago. In addition, which Everett, as you've mentioned, and is apparent, is a very close-knit community. Mm-hmm. And so when an outside person the prospect is of an outside person coming in, there's a great deal of anxiety associated with that, not only among the staff and administrators, but in the community as well. You know, we have a certain culture here. I won't presume to know everything because I'm not from Everett, but you know, we have a great athletic program. The football program is, you know, legendarily important. We have really an excellent arts program. The band and the orchestral stuff is really phenomenally well done. You can see this incredible facility that we have here. So, as someone, were you to be selected as the next superintendent, you're going to be facing, you know, that culture, and so what would your attitude be when you're coming into the culture, both with regard to people who are working within the system and the values of the community?
Sure. So first of all, I understand the pride people have in being born and bred and from Everett. I have the same pride of being from Cambridge and Somerville, and I actually live in my great-grandfather's house. It's been in the family for 110 years. My kid's a fifth generation living in Cambridge. There are many people in Cambridge, if they moved there 70 years ago, are still not Canterbridgians because they weren't from there. I wasn't born in Everett, and there's nothing I can do to change that. But I can tell you that if I were to be the successful candidate, I'd be living in Everett 24/7. I know what's required of the job. You know, I've been a 24/7 person in every role that I've had over the past 20 years, and I would be here building relationships with the staff, with the students, with the parents, with the administration, with the elected representatives. You know, even though I wouldn't be from Everett, I would be of Everett if I got this job moving forward. And I don't want to change any of the successful programs that are here. You know, I want to build upon them and expand them. I have also been asked whether, you know, what's your vision? And that's always a tough question because people want to hire somebody who's got that vision for the program, for the school district. And the problem is I need to come here and listen to all of you. You have had steady leadership for 30 years, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of great ideas that are pent up that people want to share. And I want to learn where the community wants to go. You know, we were talking earlier, I mean, Everett's changing. I mean, you were here, you know, you see the changing demographic, you see the changing property values, you see the construction going on, and forget the casino. Just because you're right next to Boston and an exploding economy, you are in a changed situation. So we need to sit down and talk about where is Everett going as a community and where do we want to be 5, 10 years from now, and build that plan and do it together. Because that's the other thing is, if I'm lucky enough to be hired for this job, I want to be here for the long haul. I don't have, you know, fantasies of, you know, being here and then running off somewhere else 3 years from now. I want to build a plan for the future with you. And no matter who the leader is in Everett, you need a plan and you need to build the structures and support in place so that no matter who, if I get hit by a bus, if I'm the superintendent, that plan and that vision carries on and goes forward. The people who stick around are the teachers and the administrators. So whatever we do together going forward has to be built with them and the community.
Hi, nice to meet you, Mr.
Hi.
Toner. I'm Alan Panarisi on the school committee.
Nice to meet you.
We were such a diverse community, and we had this discussion how a lot of the parents kind of, because English is their second language, they're, you know, they're kind of afraid to come forward. How would you try to get those people to come to the school and get involved, the parents with the kids?
Sure. Well, first, I think I would start off by going to them. So if they're not coming here for the meetings, then I want to be out in the community talking to folks where they're comfortable, whether it's their home, their church, their community organizations. So we'll start there and build the trust and respect that I talked about earlier. I mean, I'll tell you just a classroom lesson I had early on. I won't go into the details of the particular program we're using, but part of the program was having good news from school cards. And I have to tell you, I used those cards. My principal gave me a stack of 200. I think I was the only one that actually used them. And every Friday I sat down and wrote out, you know, Johnny was a good boy, Sally was a good girl, and this is what they did successfully. And now it might not have been, you know, getting 100 on a test. It might have been that they were really well behaved in school today, or they helped a friend or something. And just those simple postcards built trust with the parents, because the kids came back to school and told me, I don't know what you wrote or what you did, but my parents, gave me a big hug and took me out for ice cream because they got good news from school. When they hear from school, they don't want to just hear my kid's in trouble or there's something wrong. We have to engage them when things are going right, and and build that relationship with them, because a lot of parents, whether it's language barriers or maybe they had a very bad experience in school themselves. There's a lot of parents don't have fond memories of going to K-12, and we need to make sure that they understand that the Everett Public Schools is a welcoming community, and we're here to support them. All right, we got somebody coming. You don't have to rush. We got somebody coming.
For a friend, what is
For a friend.
what is your philosophy on restorative justice? How does it fit into your greater plan? And
So I
handle
think
that
I
one
missed,
first, I'll come back.
what's my philosophy on restorative justice? And then,
How are you going to fit that into your plan for the school?
sure. So I have not had a lot of personal experience of myself trying to implement restorative justice. I've read a lot about it. I've heard a lot of opinions on it. I've heard positive things. I've also heard negative things. The negative things usually are about it wasn't implemented well. The teachers weren't supported. They weren't trained well enough. So I think the goals and the outcomes that we want from restorative justice are exactly what we should be doing. But before we try to implement it, we need to make sure that we have built support for it and provided the teachers with the training on how to do it well. We need to move beyond the culture of suspending and expelling kids. We need to, meet with them to find out what the core issues are, give them opportunities to make amends. Obviously, there are some things that you do have to draw a line on, and they may have to be removed from the school setting if it involves weapons or drugs. But many of the instances that we see kids, especially as young as kindergarten, being suspended are for very minor incidences that would need to be dealt with in a different way. So I'm for the philosophy and goals of restorative justice. I just think if we're going to pursue it and do it, we have to provide the teachers with the supports and the administrators with the supports to do it well. Hi.
I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about your philosophy of leadership and how you see yourself as a leader.
Sure. So my real middle name is Francis, but I think my other middle name is Collaboration. If you go and Google me and look for information about Paul Toner, I hope you'll find the word collaboration mentioned a lot. I very much believe in bringing people to the table, having civil discussions, focusing on the solutions, not the people. And that's how I led, that's why I got involved with the union. That's how I led the Cambridge Teachers Association and the MTA during my 8 years there. And that's how I approach pretty much everything, is not trying to make the decision myself, except for maybe when it's my own children, but really bringing people in the community together to find what's right for everybody involved. I'm also capable of making the hard decision. Sometimes you can't reach that perfect consensus decision, but I want to hear everybody's opinion, and I don't want things to be top down. I want them to be as bottom up as possible.
Hello, Mr. Toner.
Hi.
David Ealer from the school committee. Nice to see you
Nice to
again.
see you.
Probably the most difficult job within the whole school system is being a school principal, because you have responsibilities from administration and the school committee, and also responsibility from the students, the parents, and the teachers. How would you identify your leaders within the schools in making sure that they're complying with all their the mandates as determined by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and making sure your leaders within those schools are working to meet all the goals that we have set forth under a school committee?
Yeah, so I don't know what benchmarks that you have created yet, but in terms of the state requirements, I think we need if it's not already in place, I'm sure probably elements of this is putting in a system of regular check-ins and meetings with the school-based administration and central administration, helping support those building-based administrators meet those goals and meet those requirements. In terms of any district-based benchmarks and performance tasks, we can't give them an assignment, give them a performance task, and then not actually provide them with the knowledge and supports to do it. So before we build something, we need to make sure that we can back it up and support them. I agree with you that principals, teachers' jobs are very tough, principals' job are very tough. Principals, we've had struggles across the state and elsewhere finding people that want to be principals. So I want to be as supportive as I can and find out what their needs are and help them be successful in their roles, because I don't want to have to replace principals. I want to build strength and grow principals. And quite honestly, I want to look at the teacher workforce that we have here and identify more teacher leaders to help support principals in the work that they do in their schools. Uh-oh.
So Everett, for the past several years, has had a pretty high turnover rate among our teachers. I think it's like 50% of our staff is non-PTS, right? So how do you plan to retain teachers and foster leadership and innovation among the teachers?
Sure. Well, leadership comes from the top, and I want to make sure that I'm setting a standard and a culture of support and a positive environment for folks in central administration at the school level and for the teachers. In terms of getting to the core of why people are not staying or leaving abruptly, I would, if it's not being done right now, I'd want to do exit interviews of people that are leaving to find out, what was the cause of their leaving. Sometimes it's personal issues. Sometimes it really is they didn't feel supported. Get that information, collect that data. I'd also like, again, if it's not already being done, there are a number of ways to do climate surveys of both the students, of the teachers, of the parent community, and get a sense of sort of what's the health of the school in terms of its school culture. And again, I was a supporter of, some of you may remember these things called the Mass Tells Survey, which were done 3 times in Massachusetts across the state, and 45,000 teachers did them. And if you're in your school, if more than 40% of the teachers participated, the results became public. I supported that because I felt that that would be a useful tool for superintendents, administrators, and teachers to take that data and then build a plan on how to improve the situation. I don't want to use them as an I gotcha on the school administration, but I think it's a legitimate feedback source for the administration, both central and building-based administration, that we can, use to change the culture of the school. If things don't change, and not just surveys, I would do deeper dives to look into what the situation is. But if things don't change, then maybe we have to make a change in leadership. Trifecta.
I got a big mouth. So I'm hearing you talk a lot about support strategies, things like that. Can you provide us with a specific example where you provided the tools and resources necessary for someone who worked for you to find success in their pursuits?
Yeah. So for me, it wasn't so much working directly with principals and staff. It was providing policies and resources for teachers on the broad base across the district, or advocating for changes at the state level. One-on-one, working with my executive director of the MTA, coaching her, giving her feedback, providing her with supports that she needed or wanted in order to improve her performance, working with her to support the other managers of the MTA and their professional development and growth. That's the closest thing to, in terms of an example for supporting a central administration or a school-based team. Most of the work I've done has been more about building the policies and environment. to support a larger group of people. I have gone through the Broad Academy for school management and have been provided with an awful lot of learnings and tools on how to address evaluation, get upward feedback for myself as well, because if I'm going to be giving you feedback, I should be getting feedback about my performance, because we can all improve. But I really approach the whole topic with a continuous improvement mindset. I just like with teacher evaluation, when I was dealing with that from the union, I never wanted to see it be an I gotcha situation. It shouldn't be a tool to fire people. It should be a tool to look at how you're doing, where are your strengths, where are the areas that you need to work on, and then providing you with those supports. So that's been my experience, and that's my philosophy on the issue.
I asked this earlier, and I hope I can say it in the same context. So in Everett, those of us who are born bred have a really deep appreciation for the culture that's been created over the years. So obviously, you know, our sports have been 100% paid for the students. The arts, the theater, all of the opportunities beyond the educational aspect of school to be able to build for our students. What do you feel about being able to keep those, that way of doing things in place, and also being able to expand that in the future for our students?
Sure. I've addressed this through the lens of my own kids. I have had the opportunity when my children went through the Cambridge public schools. Cambridge, like Everett, provides lots of free supports. There's not one sport that's paid for or extracurricular activity or enrichment activity. And I'm very fortunate to have had my children experience that. And I want all the kids in Everett to continue to experience that. Again, when it comes to building the budget and after you take care of the core issues like staffing and salaries and benefits and facilities, et cetera, looking at the programs, I want to be able to continue to support the strong athletic programs you have here and the arts and humanities programs you have as well. And I'd like to go further. And if it's possible with these newfound or newly legislated monies that hopefully we will see in reality going forward over the next 7 years coming from the legislature, I think we should be looking at taking a portion of that money and focusing on those particular issues, in addition to some of the other core issues like ELL training, teacher supports, and professional development. And, you know, it hasn't come up yet in this session, but it came up a lot in the last session, looking at facilities for all these programs. So I want to build upon the successes you've had. I think just today I've heard of about 30 or 40 cultural celebrations I'm going to be going to over the next year because you're a very proud city and you have many proud ethnic and cultural traditions that I look forward, hopefully, to being part of.
So I asked this when you were meeting with us at our school, and I asked the other candidates too, but not in the public session. There's so much more to being a superintendent besides just the educational aspect of it and the curriculum. Do you think that you're able to take on the political arena of the city of Everett?
Yeah. So first of all, I've heard a lot about the politics of Everett, and I know that you probably think you have the most challenging politics in the world. I think every city and town in Massachusetts has similar stories in politics. I've been dealing in politics at the local level in Cambridge for almost my entire life, and through union politics. I've had to steer a very large organization with 115,000 members, with many, many representatives from around the state representing teachers and higher ed faculty through 8 years of tough decision making. And those politics can be tough as well. I hope that coming here into Everett, maybe we can hit a reset button. I'm not naive, but at the same time, I would be a new person on the scene, building new relationships with people and trying to reset the focus on, so what are we going to do that's going to improve outcomes for students? But I also understand there are political needs that need to be met by everybody involved. People need to see that dollars are being spent wisely. People need to see that they've had wins and that they can point to things that they accomplished on the political front. And, you know, I'm happy to be the person in the background who's just advancing those missions to make sure that, you know, the focus is on the kids in the community, and whoever wants to take credit for it can take credit for it. But my goal is just to improve the outcomes for the kids. You know, I've been involved at the state level with state legislation. I've had the opportunity to work with Sal DiDomenico on advocacy around a number of union-related and public education-related topics. I've had the opportunity to work with Speaker DeLeo and Karen Spilka, the Senate President. I've had many opportunities to work with Governor Patrick and folks in the education administration through the years. And there were tough decisions that needed to be made, but I worked through the tough decisions with them so that we could get to a win-win situation. And I would approach politics here as how do we have a win-win for people, but the number one win has to be for the kids and the teachers in the school system.
So obviously a school system is a large, complicated animal with a lot of moving parts. Can you just give us a little insight into your experience managing something like that?
Sure. The thing I will just continue to point to where I actually had to manage it is the Mass Teachers Association. Again, the largest union, largest membership organization in New England. I had to deal with public relations. I had to deal with managing a 65-member. If you think a 9-member board school committee is tough, try managing a 65-member board of directors, an 11-member executive committee, a 1,600 delegate assembly. You know, dealing with the day-to-day issues of the organization, working with 15 division managers for all of our different departments at MTA, working with 40 field reps from around the state who are out representing teachers, working with almost 400 local presidents and making sure that I was listening to them and hearing their needs and trying to make sure that I brought consensus and moved forward on those issues, and dealing with you know, the day-to-day issues of a $43 million budget and making decisions about that. I was also involved with the hiring and firing of at least the managing staff at MTA. So it's really, even though it's called a union and the Teachers Association, it's not that much different from a large school system or any other large organization. It's still, it's a business operation that needs to be managed, and that was the role I played there.
So I've been delegated just to say that if anyone has another question, please ask it now, because otherwise we're going to wrap up and give Paul an opportunity to summarize what he said. But if there's anyone else who has a question they'd like to ask?
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Recently, I've read an article in the Boston Globe that published a study of students who have moved from Boston to cities like Malden, Revere, Somerville,
Yep.
and how in the 90s and early 2000s, how successful they've become, you know, within their life, successful learners, and they've accredited the schools with that.
Yep.
I was wondering, being a finalist in the Everett Public Schools, if you could pinpoint maybe 3 things that aren't in our district strategic plan that maybe you're planning to implement in the future if you become our next superintendent.
Sure. So the article was Miracle on the Mystic, and talked about how Everett and Chelsea and Malden and a variety of other of the communities here north of Boston had served really as great launching pads for the families and communities that are here. I have to admit, the strategic plan that you refer to, I mean, I was looking on the website at one point for improvement plans and stuff, and unfortunately I wasn't able to find it at that time. But based on what I've seen and heard through the interview process and the visits today, is major focus on literacy, early literacy, and literacy throughout the K-12 system. big focus on strengthening and supporting structures to support our ELL students and families and engage them, making sure that we are addressing all the needs of our special ed student population, but all of our kids through differentiated instruction. You know, there's a lot of young people who get steered into special education that didn't necessarily need to be steered that way. There's a number of other articles that have been out lately about, have we been doing literacy right? Have we been doing reading, the science of reading correctly? I think we should definitely take a hard look at what's being done here in Everett to make sure that we're aligned to the appropriate science and practice around reading, because many kids are being misidentified as needing special ed services when they just didn't learn how to read properly early on. So I think those are some of the things we need to focus on. I also really want to focus on what I see happening here at the high school with the Career Pathways program, the CTE. I know that you're building out a vocational program. You know, I would love to talk to you all about the possibility of maybe partnering with some of the 5 district partnership communities, Somerville, Cambridge. You know, all of these communities, some of them have their own vocational programs, some of them don't. We're all close enough that maybe we could share some resources around that. You know, the term of art that a lot of people use is pathways to prosperity. I want our kids to be leaving the Everett Public Schools on a pathway to prosperity, whether that involves a 4-year college degree, a 2-year associate's degree, getting into a trade program and getting in with the carpenters union or the plumbers or something. But I want our kids to leave this school system knowing success and being able to hopefully stay in this community. I mean, a real tragedy in Cambridge is that so many people can't live in Cambridge anymore. I hope we can keep Everett in terms of being able to allow people who want to stay and live in this community have that pathway to be able to stay here. Sure.
All right, well then I guess that's it. Paul, I don't know if you have any other things you'd like to say, but otherwise, thank you very much for doing this, and thanks everyone else for showing up. And the next one is next Tuesday, correct, with the last candidate.
I just want to thank you all for taking the time to be here, and I want to thank the interview committee and the search committee for giving me the chance to even be here talking to you tonight. I know that there's been a lot of tough decisions and issues that have been dealt with over the past year in Everett. I would like to be someone who can come here and work with all of you to work through some of those tough issues and get us set on a positive path forward. From what I saw here today, I mean, I already knew that I was interested in being the superintendent here. I think, you know, I saw on the video of the school committee meeting, one of your colleagues on the school committee saying that, you know, maybe some people got scared away from applying to Everett because whatever theories they had. And she said, well, if they didn't want to be in Everett, you know, they should have applied to be in Everett. I applied to be in Everett because I actually want to be here in Everett and work with Everett. So if you'll have me, I'd be very proud and honored to be the superintendent of Everett. Thank you very much.